Food Revolution Network, our mission is healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for everyone who eats. We want kids to learn about healthy food in school. We want doctors to learn how nutrition impacts health in medical school. We want the routine use of antibiotics banned from factory farms. We want a world where everyone, regardless of their ethnic or economic background, has knowledge of and access to healthy food for their family. We want a world in which heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, obesity, and diabetes are rare, and in which vibrant health is the status quo. We're spreading the word and standing for change. And with every empowerment package purchased, we make a donation to Trees for the Future, enabling them to plant an organic fruit or nut tree in a low-income community. Join this movement and support this mission. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am so excited that in about 14 minutes now, we're going to begin our broadcast of episode 8 of the Food Revolution Summit docuseries. Today, our final day of this summit, our focus is the future of life on Earth, how to be a part of the solution with the food on your plate. As we move through the day, please continue to post and engage in the comment section on the broadcast page. Share your top takeaways, your aha moments, your breakthroughs, what this means for you, how it lands in your life, what you're carrying forward from here. And you can engage with other folks using the button that's provided there. You can refresh to see the latest comments that have been submitted, and then you can engage and share and respond and help to build this powerful, positive, supportive, and uplifting community that we've been creating together throughout this entire summit. Valdon said, "I'm so grateful for this summit. I really needed it. I started eating healthy on day 2 of the summit, and I'm already feeling much better. I had a headache for the first few days. I guess it was withdrawal from all the junk I used to put in my body. I have IBS and fibromyalgia. In this week, my aches decreased drastically. My belly feels so light, like after giving birth. I lost 1 kilogram and 5 centimeters around the waist already. My energy levels are so high, I'm amazed how much I can do in one day. I started watching half of an episode a day because of fatigue, and today I even watch the interviews. My life is changing, and I am so grateful to you for that. God bless you and all your team." Valdon, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for putting this into action so immediately as you entered into this journey. And I'm so glad that we've been with you for these last days as you've been unfolding in this new way of living, and that you're seeing the results so quickly. That does happen. When you change what goes into your body and give your body the right fuel, your microbiome can start to shift within a matter of hours, certainly within a matter of days. And your blood work can change. Sometimes people's A1C levels drop, their LDL cholesterol levels drop within days. So it's not unusual what you're experiencing. Of course, it doesn't happen for everybody. Some people have their own unique journeys, but the reality is that it can happen, and you're experiencing it, and I'm so glad. And I want to give you a little challenge here to keep with it, because I've seen a lot of folks over the years who get inspired. They think, oh my gosh, I can do something. I have hope. And then over time, old habits, social pressures creep back in, and they wind up right back where they started, which can be very demoralizing. So my challenge to you and my invitation to you and my encouragement to you is to come up with a strategy to get the resources or support so that you can stay the course and even deepen in your journey. And FRN has a lot of resources to support you in that. For those who are wanting to dive in, we have a course called Plant Powered and Thriving that my dad and I created that really walks you through implementing a whole foods plant-based lifestyle and also optimizing it if you're already on the path. And that's available from our website. If you stay on our email list in the next couple of weeks, we'll invite you to a masterclass we created called Food for Health. And from there, you can actually get into Plant Powered and Thriving for half price. So that may be something you want to consider. Also, for everybody to know, we have a membership community called Whole Life Club. And again, if you stay on our list, you'll learn more about it. Or anytime you get an empowerment package, you can join with a 30-day free trial. And that's our ongoing support community for folks who want to make this happen long term. Keep going, stay with it, and support each other and lift each other up. Karen said, I really enjoyed Joel Furman's extended interview. Thank you so much. I've been watching most of the others too. Wonderful, Karen. For everybody who doesn't know, every day of this summit, in addition to our episode and live broadcast, we also offer 3 extended interviews with guest experts tied to the day's theme, where we go deep into the topics that we're focusing on that day. There's a total of 45 extended interviews that went into this summit. Over the course of the summit, we've been sharing about 24 of them. And then empowerment package owners, of course, have lifetime access to the whole enchilada. Lori said, it was a great idea to include the 45 extended interviews. I get re-energized each year to add ground flax and hemp seeds to my meals from John's reminders. So fun to try the new recipes. I bought ingredients to make a half batch of spinach artichoke veggie burgers tomorrow. Love the videos of recipe making. I also bought ingredients to make the blueberry beet smoothie bowl after watching the demonstration video. When I eat chicken and dairy, my knuckles on my hands get stiff and arthritic. When I told this to my primary care physician, she told me not to worry, that she can refer me to have a surgeon fix it once it gets worse. Not one mention of my diet. She already knows I eat healthfully, but not even encouraging words around food choices. Well, Lori, thanks so much for sharing your story, and I'm so glad you are enjoying the recipes of the day. Every day of the summit, there are 3 more, plus another recipe demo video from Nicole Andrea Russert, RDN, and they're so fabulous, aren't they? That is so striking about your primary care physician. It sounds to me like maybe your body is telling you that chicken and dairy are not agreeing with you, and they're causing perhaps some inflammation in your body, and that's why you're having those symptoms. It sure sounds that way to me, and I think, that possibly changing diet is a lot easier and safer than surgery. So I'm sure you know that, but lots of love to you in the journey, and congratulations on enjoying this food revolution in the most intimate and personal way possible by eating amazing food. Karen said, Ocean nailed it when he said FRN people have big hearts and big smarts. This community is full of compassion to learn and grow. This is my 6th summit, and it keeps getting better with age. You've really made the lectures longer and have really dived in depth of the subject matter. You breathe new life into it with new speakers. It has a certain intensity this year. I noticed and I love it. Great job. I'm Karen from Chicago. I've been whole foods plant-based vegan for several years. I started resistance training at the gym 3 months ago and have never felt this good. For a 66-year-old who lost 40 pounds, that's saying a lot. Thank you, John and Ocean, for all you do. I keep John in my prayers. God bless you and the FRN community. Thank you so much, Karen. So glad you're here with us. Thanks for sharing that story. And thanks for also sharing about your experience with exercise and resistance training at the gym and how good it's feeling in your body. That is wonderful to hear. Today, our focus is going to be on the planet and how our food choices affect the world around us. We face some big problems in the world right now. That's no secret. And it can be easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel frightened, to wonder, what kind of world are we going to leave for our kids, our grandkids, future generations? And I'm always looking for how I can make a difference, how I can be a part of the solution, how I can contribute in some way to making things better. Maybe it's because I'm a humanitarian. Maybe it's just because it makes me feel good to do good, because I like to be a part of the solution, because cynicism and despair and fear are not particularly pleasant emotions, and my direct experience is that action replaces apathy, and then we have hope again. Because to me, hope isn't so much of a noun as a verb. It's something we create from how we live. So I'm always wondering, how can we create positive change in the world? And I'm somebody who doesn't just want to wear a Save the Whales button. I want to actually save the whales. And so I'm interested in what actually matters and what actually makes a difference. And when it comes to food choices, we have immense power. Humanity is kind of on a collision course with systemic environmental collapse right now. If we continue on our current trajectory, we're on course to run out of water and topsoil and food for future generations. But there is such good news. It's not too late to make changes. And when it comes to food, the food choices that we make, the way our food is grown, the way it's harvested, the way it's prepared has immense impact, not just on our health, but also on the health of our planet. You're going to learn today how you can contribute to sustainability and biodiversity and soil health, how the movements for natural and organic and fair trade and local and plant-based foods have immense power to help us heal our lives and to be a part of the solution on this planet. It's time for some grounded hope, for some real solutions that can really make a world of difference. And you're going to get that today. So if you just joined us, we will be starting episode 8 in about 4 minutes now. And I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, welcoming you. And you're in the right place if you want to learn how to be a part of the solution on this planet. As we move through the day, please continue to post and share in the comment section on the broadcast page. Tell us your top takeaways, your aha moments, what this all means in your life, and refresh those comments using the button provided so you can see the most recent ones that have been submitted. You can also reply to other folks and like their posts and show the love. Terry said, I really enjoyed the episode on the science of nutrition. Giving accurate information and up-to-date information on soy is great. I remember years ago hearing it's bad for you, it's good for you, and it was just so confusing. Thank you for the up-to-date and accurate info. Thank you for the clear info on keto. And thank you for explaining lectins, lycopene, and the updated and accurate science. I've heard some of the major information, and it's a bit concerning as well. I'm so glad you all studied to clear up the confusion. Also, thank you for sharing about goitrogens and thyroid and cabbage and Brussels sprouts and so forth. I hadn't heard that, but sure, I probably will sometime. So thanks for accurate information again. And also thanks for sharing the encouraging story from the 81-year-old doctor who's been swimming at great lengths and went plant-based a year ago and has done so well. This was so encouraging. Thank you so much. This is almost over, and though I know I can go back and listen since I have the empowerment program, I am going to miss the daily sessions. This has been so great. Thank you. Well, Terry, thank you so much for being a part of it with us, and thank you for calling out some of the specific things you learned yesterday that were meaningful. Yesterday's episode was just packed with so much potent information, and the response to it has been tremendous. And I thank you for sharing some of your highlights and what it meant for you. And I'm so glad you're here, and I love that you're joining us for the daily sessions. And I also love that you got the empowerment package, so you can go back and listen and watch anytime you want. And you can also dive into the extended interviews, 45 of them, which can be a great way to keep this revolution going and growing in your life day in and day out. Carrie said, I'm more confused than ever on intermittent fasting. So you don't want to eat a big meal at night. You don't want to skip breakfast, and you don't want to eat in an 8-hour window. I've also heard that 3-day fasting will eliminate muscle, which you don't want because it helps to burn fat. So I'm not sure what's left as far as the timing of meals. I hope you can enlighten me. Thanks so much for this summit. You and your father are much loved. Well, Carrie, thank you for your question. It can be a bit confusing because research is evolving and we keep learning more, honestly. Research is wonderful in that it can offer insights to best practices, but there are often all kinds of variables involved that can make it a little hard to determine one best practice that suits everybody. In the case of intermittent fasting, some of the variables include the amount of time that eating is restricted, the exact hours to restrict eating, the kinds of meals that are consumed during the periods of eating, which is a really big deal, right? And then you have all the different variables about different individuals studied from different demographics to the health of the people involved. Are they generally healthy or do they have pre-existing conditions? And so much more. So as Dr. Lori Marbus suggested, listen to your own body and do what feels best for you and what gives you the best health outcomes. Overall, it seems like there may be greater consensus from experts around consuming a larger portion of calories earlier in the day, having a good breakfast, also a solid lunch, compared to your last meal of the day at dinner being a bit lighter and steering clear from late night snacking. And of course, the quality of the food you're consuming matters in a massive way, whether you're eating once a day or twice a day or 5 times a day. Time-restricted eating may restrict time, but you don't have to approach it with a restrictive mindset when the time to eat approaches. So eating an abundance of nutrient-dense food, making sure you're getting plenty of plant-based protein, as well as fiber and vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients can all be super helpful. Now, with regard to muscle loss, anytime you're fasting for a prolonged period, you're tapping into your fat stores as well as your muscle stores. When you don't have enough carbohydrate intake, your body converts fat and protein into energy. Muscles are made of protein, so yes, muscle mass can be lost as a result of fasting, especially extended fasting. This is why it's even more important to focus on the quality of your food when you are eating. So getting enough plant-based protein and calories overall when you're eating can minimize muscle loss and optimize metabolism. Also, while you may be able to prevent excessive muscle loss by eating the right foods, you can't build new muscle just by eating protein or any food. Building new muscle is a result of strength training. So if you do choose to fast again, choose nutrient-dense foods that provide adequate calories and protein during your feeding times to minimize muscle loss and optimize nutrition and metabolic outcomes, and maintain a strength training routine to minimize that muscle loss and even maybe grow your muscles again. And again, of course, listen to your body. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for everybody, but we are seeing pretty clearly that skipping breakfast is not associated with beneficial health. All right, everybody, it looks like we are ready to move into our broadcast of episode 8. Here we go.
It's time for a food revolution.
The food revolution is impactful.
The food revolution is transformative.
Compassion.
It's time for a food revolution.
The food revolution is life.
The future of medicine.
Long overdue.
It's time.
It's time.
It is time for a food revolution.
The food revolution is our future.
It's power to change the world.
And it's available for everyone.
It's time for a food revolution.
It's time for a food revolution.
Join the food revolution.
Join the food revolution.
Now is the time.
So far in this summit, we've mainly focused on the connection between diet and health. And we've seen over and over again that what you eat can have a profound impact on how well and how long you live. When you give your body the right fuel, you will enjoy more vitality, more happiness, and much lower risk of chronic disease, disability, and premature death.
In this episode, we'll see that the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet, as wonderful as they are for human health, also extend far beyond the individual. We'll explore how industrialized animal agriculture is fueling climate chaos and mass extinction, polluting our soil and water and air, and making it more difficult to sustainably feed future generations. We'll look at the wider social and economic impacts of our food choices, and we'll see how powerfully the same food choices that are best for human health also provide enormous benefits for the future of life on Earth. I'm Ocean Robbins.
And I'm John Robbins.
And you're watching the Food Revolution Summit.
Just like the human bodies that we see in front of us that are struggling under this burden of chronic disease, everything is struggling under the burden of chronic disease. The mismanagement of our world, that we have not stewarded the environment and the soil and the air and the water and the animals in the right way. We've exploited them for profit and we've exploited them for personal gain. And now the price tag is coming due.
There are so many problems in our world that can feel overwhelming. Most people would like, if they could, to leave a better world for their grandchildren to inherit with less poverty, less war, less pollution, and more beauty and more compassion. And yet the sober reality is that in many ways right now, humanity seems to be on a collision course with systemic environmental collapse. Now, in this episode, we're going to take an honest look at what we're up against. We're not going to sugarcoat anything because you deserve the truth. But we're also going to show you how powerful your food choices are to make you a part of the solution.
As you'll see, the future of life on Earth is never so much in your hands as when you sit down to eat. Let's start with facing some inconvenient truths. Where are we headed if we don't change course?
The way we humans live on Earth is sending it into a decline. Human beings have overrun the world. We're replacing the wild with the tame. Our planet is headed for disaster.
That was Sir David Attenborough. Many of us have loved the gorgeous films about the natural world that he and the BBC have brought to us over the years. What does it mean when a truly wise elder of such extraordinary gravitas and a vast knowledge tells us our planet is headed for disaster?
Sir David Attenborough has also given us a clue as to what we must do. In his 2020 documentary film, David Attenborough, A Life on Our Planet, he advocates for people to stop eating meat, or at the very least, to substantially reduce meat consumption. He tells us that if we want to save wildlife and the planet, we should go vegetarian because the planet can't support billions of meat eaters.
If we aren't going to whitewash and minimize to make what's happening today seem more palatable, then I think we need to take some very deep breaths and ask seriously, what is this disaster that Sir David Attenborough and others are warning us about?
To put it crudely, very large parts of the planet are likely to be uninhabitable unless there is a very sharp change of direction. We're going to see billions of people left outside what is called the human climate niche, the parts of the world where humans can live. Even wider parts of the world, it's not going to be possible to grow crops. It's going to be either too hot for the crops, there won't be enough soil moisture, there'll be much more severe droughts and other shock events, including cyclones, hurricanes, fire, all of which can be devastating to crops. And we will see, with rising seawater and shrinking freshwater aquifers, the sucking of seawater into the ground, poisoning those aquifers and making it impossible to irrigate the crop. And then on top of that, we have the soil erosion. On top of that, we have the collapse of marine food chains. On top of that, we have the potential collapse of massive earth systems like the Amazon rainforest, which gets eroded and eroded until it can no longer generate its own rainfall and flips suddenly into savanna conditions and then changes climatic conditions right the way around the tropics. So all of these frightening converging forces are likely to materialize by the end of the century unless those of us who are alive and adults today change the system.
That was George Monbiot. George is a British journalist and activist who's received dozens of awards, including the prestigious United Nations Global 500 Award for Outstanding Environmental Achievement, which was presented to him by Nelson Mandela. George was one of the early voices sounding the alarm about climate change, an alarm that has now grown into a worldwide chorus. Today, virtually every serious scientist on the planet is in agreement that if we don't make major changes, we're headed towards a point of no return. And now these researchers are also telling us that if we're serious about stopping climate chaos, there is one factor that deserves far more attention.
Climate and environmental scientists warn that we are fast approaching the point of no return if we don't make a substantial course reversal.
We see really serious catastrophic effects in the next few years, certainly in the next decade or two. The world will be completely different from the way it is now.
Since 1900, we have seen a dramatic increase in worldwide weather-related disasters. There have now been 4 times more weather-related disasters in the last 50 years than in the previous 100.
We began to work together to move this issue onto the global center stage. There was a lot of discussion about the contribution from buildings and from industrial factories, but I became aware during that same period of time that there was another factor that was going undiscussed, and that is the role of animal agriculture, which I could see was playing some significant role around the planet. But this was the elephant in the room no one wanted to talk about.
I think one of the deep, dark secrets of the American agricultural system is that it is responsible for an astonishing level of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is something that I think people just have no idea about.
Overwhelmingly, the major contributor to those problems is animal agriculture, because it just takes a lot more to produce a given amount of calories from animals than it does from plants. A lot more land, a lot more crops if you're feeding them with crops, or even more land if you're feeding them with grass, because that's quite a land inefficient way of producing food. And so you have to occupy vast tracts of the planet which would otherwise support wild ecosystems.
Last year, researchers from the University of Oxford completed an extraordinary study that gives us the largest and most comprehensive look yet at the environmental costs of meat production.
They found that vegan diets are responsible for 75% fewer greenhouse gases than diets containing meat. And that vegan diets also result in 75% less land use, 54% less water use, and 66% less biodiversity loss.
The benefits from a vegan diet are so enormous, the researchers added, that even small changes in cutting down the amount of meat a person eats can make a huge difference for the earth and for all the life it holds.
Let's face it, the earth is changing. You just look at the thermometer any day. We are inching up more and more and more. And so we know that the greenhouse gases are having an effect. If anything, it's probably more rapid than scientists had predicted. There are a lot of drivers of this, but one of them is the fact that if you could take all the cows in North America, put them on one side of the scale, take all the people in North America, put them on the other side of the scale, the cows outweigh us dramatically. The mass of cows is just huge, and every single one of them is a belching methane creator. It comes out the front end, and methane coming out of every animal in the feedlot, in the dairy industry, and so forth. Methane is a dramatically powerful greenhouse gas, much more powerful than CO2. And so researchers have concluded a long time ago that while we're waiting to cap the smokestacks and we're waiting for people to drive electric and all the things, that should all happen. You can change what you have for lunch. And as soon as you do, you become a methane fighting machine yourself.
When you look at climate change, for example, most people don't realize that animal husbandry, especially cows, contributes more to global warming than all transportation combined. And there's a combination of things. So cows eat grass. Grass has cellulose in it, so which is hard to digest. So they've evolved a separate stomach called a rumen, which is full of bacteria that pre-digest the break apart the cell walls, the cellulose, so that they can get access to the protein and nutrients in the grass. Well, a byproduct of that is methane, right? So methane, and it gets emitted from both ends of the cow. We also have to grow the feed to feed the cattle, right? And so there's pesticides, there's herbicides. Those are typically petroleum based, right? We have to till up the ground. We have to take the cows to slaughter. The other thing people don't realize is like you look at Amazon forest loss, right? Most of that is driven by cattle, right? And so when we tear down the Amazon forest, we lose the ability of that forest to capture carbon. And I think the numbers, it's like every hectare of forest captures about 30 tons of carbon. And when you cut that down, you lose that. And it takes at least a generation to 2 generations to regrow that, to recapture that carbon after you replant the trees. So why are we cutting down the Amazon rainforest? Well, it's either to create grassland to graze the cattle, or to grow cover crop to feed the cattle. And I mean, you look at the other huge greenhouse gas is nitric oxide, right? So where does that come from? That's about 300 times greater greenhouse gas. Mainly comes from manure. And so you see these pictures of these huge, like the chicken houses, and there's these big retaining ponds where they dump all the manure. I mean, the amount of NO2 that escapes into the atmosphere is profound. And so people have no idea about the impact, the disassociation. And that we haven't even started talking about, like water use and land use.
The single biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions is beef. Animal food production in general has a higher impact on greenhouse gas emissions than does the production of vegetable foods. But beef, far and away, is the most serious contributor because ruminant animals have this unfortunate habit of burping methane. And if you have a lot of animals in one place, they're burping a lot of methane in one place.
So beef is off the charts. Other animal foods are behind beef, but mammals invariably are high, poultry high relative to plants. Basically, all animal foods have a higher environmental impact than plant foods overall, mammals in particular.
In 2006, the issue of climate change was becoming harder and harder to ignore. The link between climate change and fossil fuels was becoming more widely accepted and discussed. But somehow the meat industry had managed, at least so far, to dodge the spotlight. Scientists were aware that the methane produced by grazing cattle constituted a substantial portion of the greenhouse gases we're spewing into the atmosphere. But there had been no attempt yet to quantify how large a chunk that might be. In fact, the meat industry had been fighting long and hard to prevent just such an effort from being made.
Yes, but then an intrepid group of researchers at the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, felt it was time to dig in. They knew they would face resistance from the FAO itself as well as from the meat industry. After all, the FAO had been founded in part to increase global livestock production. It was an organization that felt its mission was to represent the industry, not to scrutinize it.
But these researchers persevered even against very strong headwinds, and they produced a seminal document called Livestock's Long Shadow. Their report concluded that livestock were responsible for 18% of all global greenhouse gas emissions, an even larger contribution to climate chaos than the entire world's transportation sector, including all of the cars, the trucks and planes and ships and trains globally combined.
Now, for their trouble, the researchers now tell us they were censored, sabotaged, undermined, and victimized. There were complaints from Big Meat that the FAO has fallen into the hands of vegan activists. And there were personal threats such as the anti-livestock people are a pest that, quote, needs to be eradicated.
When one scientist wanted to place Meatless Monday leaflets in the FAO cafeteria, she was told in no uncertain terms to remove and destroy them. And then the researchers were told by their bosses at the FAO, basically, to just shut up. Even if livestock contributes 18% to climate change, they were told. The FAO will not say that. It's not in the interest of the FAO to highlight environmental impacts.
What followed from there was a concerted effort to undermine the message of livestock's long shadow. When further research at the FAO found that livestock was a major contributor to climate chaos and the largest source of water pollution on the planet, that report never saw the light of day. It was completely buried.
Meanwhile, meat industry lobbyists continued to put pressure on senior FAO managers. Feeling the heat, the FAO leadership decided that henceforth its goal was to improve the image of the livestock sector. Accordingly, in 2013, the FAO produced a follow-up paper. Instead now of talking about livestock's long shadow, the new paper was titled Tackling Climate Change Through Livestock. And it revised the 18% number downwards to 14.5%. And then, a year later, continuing in their commitment to downplay the role that livestock do play in climate change, the FAO found a way to again revise it downwards, this time to only 11%.
But meanwhile, other teams of researchers and scientists had become interested in studying the topic. A study at Oxford University calculated that if animals were indeed taken off the menu, that one change would save $30 trillion in health and environmental damage. And an in-depth report by World Bank scientists, which was titled Livestock and Climate Change, corrected errors in the FAO's reports and concluded that at least 51%, that's more than half of all greenhouse gas emissions, should be attributed to animal agriculture.
So now we have the FAO subjected to extensive lobbying pressure, telling us livestock are responsible for 11% of global climate change emissions. And we have World Bank scientists telling us the correct number is 51%. What's the truth?
There's been a series of revelations about the lobbying pressure from the livestock industry, the meat industry, bearing down on the Food and Agriculture Organization and changing the results. That should never happen in science. But unfortunately, the science is taking second place to the politics here. There's a recent independent study which put it more like a quarter of all emissions, about 25%. But the truth is that we don't actually have enough science to be able to state definitively this is how much it's producing, partly because of that industry pressure. You know, it's cut off the funding sources for the research we need to do. But what we can say with confidence is that those Food and Agriculture Organization figures just do not stand up because they've been deliberately watered down through political pressure. And that's really outrageous. That's an insult to everyone. It insults our intelligence. It undermines our ability to solve our common problems.
When that kind of industry pressure takes over an organization like the FAO, it really does undermine our ability to solve our common problems. There's a famous Woody Guthrie song, "This land is made for you and me." That might be poetically true, but it's not the reality today. Because now this land isn't for you or for me, it's for the meat industry. Almost half of all America's land is used for meat, dairy, and egg production. Around the world, more than a third of all habitable land on planet Earth is used for livestock. Much of this land was once forest that was cut down to graze livestock or to grow feed for livestock.
You might be asking, so what? Agriculture is land intensive and we need food. Well, that's true. But not all agriculture is equally land intensive. Meat-heavy diets require vastly more land to produce the same amount of protein than do diets with less or no meat. If we ate less meat and more plant-based foods, we'd free up a lot of land, which we could then use to make a huge dent in climate change.
Yes. To avoid the worst effects of climate change, it won't be enough to only reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we spew into the air, though of course we desperately need to do that. But we also need to remove these gases from the atmosphere. And there is one known effective way to do that, which doesn't rely on unproven carbon capture technology. The way we can remove these gases from the atmosphere is by rewilding. Rewilding is the term used to describe retiring agricultural land so it can return to its original ecosystem, so that its vegetation can sequester carbon dioxide, provide habitat for wildlife, protect biodiversity, and save species from extinction.
We could do all of that if we reduce our meat consumption. But currently, that is not the direction we're headed.
Livestock population is growing much faster than the human population. As livestock numbers are just growing and growing at 2.4%, which means a doubling every 30 years. And it's already the case that of the weight of mammals on Earth, just 4% are wild ones, 36% are human beings, and 60% are livestock. And then that's going to double, by soon after 2050 at this rate. Then it'll just be 2% of the weight of mammals on Earth being wild. It's a terrifying prospect. This is what's eating us out of house and home. And, just as importantly as leaving fossil fuels in the ground, we have to stop farming and eating animals.
We're now over the line. And the idea that we're going to double meat production between now and 2050, this is just unsustainable. This is going to have to give. Our diet is taking us to an abyss.
We're utilizing a tremendous amount of our land to grow food for animals that only supply a small percent of the calories and protein that we need. 80% of the land is supplying 37% of the protein and 18% of the calories, right, that we actually need. And so in the breadbasket of the United States, we have these huge, amazing farms. I mean, they've had historically the richest soil and the greatest opportunity to provide living food for a living population. But because of subsidies and because of animal agriculture, they're utilizing the land to grow food to feed the animals. And in the process, because of the way we're managing the soil without cover crops and the exposure and the evaporation, it requires large amounts of water. And so we have to water the crops in a changing environment. with lots of evaporation, and we're draining aquifers. So we have this triple threat of lower water, eroding soil, and disproportionate use of grain and soy, corn to feed animals that are not meeting the physiologic and caloric needs of a population. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a storm on the horizon that not many people are really thinking about.
Our forests were once full of the most incredible life. In more recent years, we began to grow an insatiable appetite for meat and dairy. And as our demand for more meat grew, we needed more and more land. So we slashed and burned our way through the pristine forests, destroying everything in our paths to make way for the animals we desired to eat. As these animals weren't allowed to roam free as they naturally do in the wild, their grazing areas soon became empty. And so, of course, we needed to feed them. So again, we slashed and burned our way through more and more forests, sowed the ground with genetically enhanced corn and soya, and then doused it in pesticides, herbicides, and synthetic chemical fertilizer.
Cutting down of the rainforest, this using of arable land is leading to major habitat destruction, which is the main source of biodiversity loss. And in my lifetime, the number of birds, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals has halved. The number of individuals has literally halved. And this should be on the top of the list of every government, every corporation, every UN official looking at the impact of industrial animal agriculture on our sheer survival as a species. It is an emergency situation.
Leah just mentioned that in her lifetime, the number of birds, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals has halved. That evokes a lot of grief for me, and I agree with her that this really is an emergency kind of situation. In the US, scientists recently found that the population of monarch butterflies has fallen by 90% in the last 20 years, and the population of some types of bumblebees have dropped by 87% over the same period. If our goal was to drive as many species as possible to extinction, or if we just didn't care, then maybe then our current system of industrial meat production might make sense. But that is not the world I want to create, and I'm pretty sure it's not the world you want to create either.
No. We're here because we care. And because we care, we also need the facts. So keeping up with our pledge to you not to sugarcoat what's happening, let's talk about another crisis that's brewing and then see what a world of difference our food choices can make. Let's talk about water.
We're maxing out the use of fresh water. And in many places, freshwater resources are beginning to fail. And they will fail catastrophically in some parts of the world at current rates of use.
A report published by WikiLeaks as far back as 2009 exposed the conversations between Nestlé executives and US officials called the Tour de Horizon. The Nestlé executives said that their own research had shown that the world was set to run out of fresh water within the next 30 years. It stated that one of the greatest reasons for our detour down this catastrophic path is the global demand for meat products.
So if there's a drought in California, is the answer low-flow shower heads and, don't water your grass? Or is it don't eat hamburger? I mean, and we don't even have that dialogue. And there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of politics behind all that. But people have to start making the connection. I mean, the amount of embedded water in a cheeseburger, hamburger is 1,000 liters, right?
Of course, growing almost any kind of food requires water. But certain foods and dietary patterns have a much larger water footprint than others do. If the rest of the world ate the quantities of meat, eggs, and dairy products that Americans do, the planet would have run out of fresh water 15 years ago.
A lot of people talk about how much fresh water we use for hydrofracking. 700 billion gallons globally is wasted on fracking. So 700 billion gallons. Sounds like a lot, but animal agriculture, the production of animals that we use for meat around the globe, uses 70 trillion gallons of fresh water a year, hundreds of thousands of times as much as fracking. And we give the cows and the chickens the good stuff, right? They don't get the Flint, Michigan, lead-tainted condoms floating in it water. They get the top shelf stuff because we don't want to screw up our sausage links. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, here's the part. I'm a vegetarian and pigs are people too, meh. But no. Let's ignore how the animals are treated in our factory torture farming. Let's pretend they're treated amazing for just a minute. It's like a celebrity backstage at the Oscars. They're just being fawned over and they get swag bags with free Apple Watches. Point is, you should still be upset about this because animal agriculture is killing us. And corporate media is fantastically pathetic on this topic. They never mention meat production. They never mention that a quarter pounder takes 660 gallons of fresh water to create. That's the equivalent of showering for 2 months.
When a comedian tells us that the amount of water it takes to make 1 quarter-pound burger is equivalent to the amount of water it takes to shower for 2 months, we might wonder if that's accurate. Well, it is. What I want to ask you is, given all that we've been talking about here, is there anything that's happening now that gives you hope?
Well, yes, there is. What gives me hope is that so many of us are looking for a way to turn things around and to make our world a better place. The very fact that we know so much about the trouble we're in is a result of enormous dedication from tens of thousands of devoted researchers. And another thing that gives me hope is what some of these researchers are discovering about what is possible. As bad as things are, that's how much better they could be with a change. The benefits of eating fewer animal products and more whole plant foods can be measured in our arteries and in our aquifers and in our carbon emissions.
And it also matters, and matters a great deal, how we grow the plants that we eat. Currently, we use an enormous amount of agrochemicals, such as pesticides, and synthetic fertilizers.
So you think fertilizer, what's wrong with fertilizer? It's good for plants, isn't it? Well, yeah, it's great for growing crops, but the trouble is that it fertilizes everything. The whole planet has been fertilized with the phosphate that we've dug up from the ground and with the nitrogen that we've sucked out of the air and turned into reactive nitrogen, which is a very different matter, through industrial processes, the Haber-Bosch process. And that has just flooded the planet with loads and loads of these active chemicals, which then stimulates plant growth in all sorts of places where you really do not want to be stimulating plant growth, like in rivers and like in the oceans. And that creates blooms of single-celled algae, which can then kill the rest of life in those places. It's creating dead zones at sea, among other impacts. And the reason for that is that by day, the single-celled algae photosynthesize and produce oxygen, but at night they respire, suck up the oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. And in doing so, they basically asphyxiate whole ecosystems. And we see rivers dying, we see oceans dying because of this over-fertilization. And we also see soil ecosystems being very severely damaged. In fact, if you apply too much nitrogen to the soil, you think, we just slap the fertilizer on and that's going to be great. But you can actually cause the entire soil structure to collapse and then plants stop growing in the soil. So it has a paradoxical effect. It's useful up to a point. You get beyond that point and suddenly you're causing more harm than good. And so we urgently need to get away from that. Similarly with pesticides. I mean, we call them pesticides as if the only things they kill are pests, right? But many of them are like broad spectrum biocides. They will kill many of the life forms they come into contact with. And people say, look at the bees being killed. And yeah, it's a really frightening situation. But actually the bees are just like one set of species. If you look at what's happening in the soil as a result of pesticides, it's killing entire food chains. And we're not even aware of that. We don't even think about it. No one's talking about the springtails and the mites and the nematodes and the other species in the soil being killed off, but they're absolutely essential. These are the species which build the soil.
Can we feed the world without destroying it? The difference between death and life, between extinction and abundance, is the difference between dirt and soil. Just a handful of healthy soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on the planet. The entire food chain and our very existence is made possible by billions of tiny creatures coexisting right under our feet. Complexities of galactic proportions. Since the dawn of agriculture some 10,000 years ago, the simple act of tilling our land has been disruptive to fragile soil life, its ability to hold water, and turning soil carbon into atmospheric carbon dioxide. With the invention of machinery and powerful new chemicals, industrial agriculture has exponentially exacerbated the issue.
So this is a great challenge we face, to feed the world without devouring the planet. I think the secret is in the soil. I think a much better understanding of the soil and the complex relationships between plants, bacteria, fungi, and all the other organisms in the soil can help us to increase production, or at least to maintain current levels of production without having to slap on all these chemicals. We've kept ourselves alive through soil chemistry, but in the future, we'll keep ourselves alive through soil biology.
Soil is more complex, maybe, than even we can ever imagine or comprehend. Billions and billions of organisms in a single tablespoon of soil that have this incredible life connection with the plant that's growing, and they're responsible for the phytochemicals in the plant that actually give us health. Going back to the most elemental aspect of growing food, the soil. We have a tremendous problem today with soil erosion. We've lost at least 40% of our topsoil, washing down the rivers into the ocean. And along with it, all the chemical herbicides and pesticides that are creating dead zones in our ocean. We're just outside of the Gulf of Mexico, where the Mississippi River enters the Gulf. There's a dead zone the size of New Jersey, where there is no living life in the water.
Roughly 30 soccer fields worth of soil are lost every single minute. Today, 70% of our planet's soils have already been destroyed. At this rate, the Earth runs out of farmable soil in a mere 60 years. Without soil, all ecosystems outside of our oceans become impossible. We can either wake up before it's too late, or guarantee a path to consistent drought, extreme food scarcity, and catastrophic climate change. Is our only option a system with a built-in expiration date? Or will we acknowledge our responsibility to this planet and uphold our debt to future generations?
Soil is a biological structure. It's like a coral reef. And without the organisms that live in it, there is no soil. The soil disappears. So we urgently need to get away from this. But, and here's a real constraint, at the same time, we do need to keep food production levels high enough to support 8 billion people.
So how do we feed 8 billion people without using chemical fertilizers and pesticides? Is it even possible?
Well, it's not possible if we continue eating as much meat as we've been doing. But it is absolutely possible if we make the change. Right now, the world's cattle consume a quantity of food equal to the caloric needs of nearly 9 billion people, which is more than the entire human population on Earth.
Wow.
So when we cut down on our meat consumption, we can free up huge amounts of food and land, which can make it much easier to feed the world sustainably, organically, and healthfully.
And even a simple swap, like eating less beef and more beans, can make a huge impact. Recently, Dr. Helen Harwit from Harvard University and a team of scientists she led calculated what would happen if every single American made the simple dietary change of just substituting beans for beef. They found that if every American made that one change, the US could come very close to meeting its current greenhouse gas emission goals, even if nothing about our energy infrastructure or transportation system changed at all.
That is just amazing. And the benefits don't stop there. Even the FAO, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which, as we've seen, typically does the bidding of big meat, says that growing more beans, lentils, and other legumes is one of the most powerful steps we can take to improve the health of the world's soils.
Can you tell us, how does planting beans and other legumes help our soils?
It's because when beans and other legumes are grown as crops, they transfer nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil, which completely eliminates any need for nitrogen fertilizers. And to me, this is beautiful. We have nutritionists telling us that legumes are excellent sources of protein and fiber and many essential minerals and phytochemicals. We have environmental scientists telling us that shifting from beef to beans is fabulous for the climate. And we have soil scientists telling us that legumes have a unique capacity to take nitrogen out of the air and draw it into the soil, which eliminates the need for farmers to use fossil fuel-based nitrogen fertilizers.
And as well, we've learned from the study of the blue zones, which are those areas in the world where people live the longest and the healthiest lives, that there is one major thing that people living in all the various blue zones have in common. And that's that all of them eat a good amount of beans or other legumes. So beans, lentils, and other legumes are part of the answer to the world's nutritional needs. They're part of the answer to the fertility of the world's soils, and they're part of how we can address climate change. That's huge. But while this is an important piece of the puzzle, it's not the whole puzzle.
No, not at all. We also need systemic change. If you think about it, the fossil fuel industry has been granted the greatest market subsidy ever, the privilege to dump its wastes into the atmosphere at no charge. I think we need policies that require polluters to pay for the climate damage done by their products. Such policies would tilt the advantage to those forms of energy and those forms of food production that are not destroying our planet. There is absolutely no way we can solve climate change unless we greatly reduce our consumption of meat, and unless we lower our reliance on pesticides and other chemicals in growing our food.
That is so true. Some people believe that fish is part of the answer. Let's take a look.
Our oceans have also become filled with plastic. As the oceans are so large, it is a challenge for any scientist to accurately understand where most of this plastic is coming from. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, covering an area of about 1.6 million square kilometers, may provide a unique opportunity to better understand the growing problem of microplastics in the sea. A team of scientists from the organization Ocean Cleanup have been studying the patch for some time and were surprised when they discovered that the vast majority of plastic in the patch is not from old drinking straws or used plastic water bottles, but from thousands of tons of discarded fishing gear broken down by the sea into trillions of pieces of microplastic. A study recently published in the journal Nature found that about 80% of the plastic in the Pacific is made up of discarded fishing gear. Many scientists agree that one of the greatest things we as individuals can do to solve this problem of a plastic ocean is to move away from eating fish and switch to a plant-based diet.
Microplankton are tiny ocean plants that are responsible for producing 80% of the world's oxygen. How are they faring with the amount of plastic now in our ocean waters?
Microplankton are found throughout the oceans. They are filter feeders. When the researchers add microplastics into the plankton's environment, they consistently observe them ingesting the plastic particles. Unaware that the tiny particles are made up of toxic chemicals, the plankton consume them indiscriminately. The researchers observe how the chemicals accumulate within the organs of these small marine creatures. The toxic plankton are then eaten by larger fish, and researchers have found that much of the fish that we are eating today has bioaccumulated these chemicals within their flesh. A study by the University of Plymouth found that over a third of all the fish tested contained microplastics. As we eat these contaminated fish, we ingest the same toxic chemicals into our bodies, and recent research suggests similar toxic accumulation in humans.
As we've been running out of wild fish in the oceans, more and more of our fish are now coming from fish farms. Is this a good thing?
Fish farming is becoming more and more popular as we deplete the oceans of wild fish. And wild fish has been overtaken globally by farm fish. And farm fish has a very negative impact on both the welfare of fish and on the environment. For the fish, they are living in these overcrowded aquaculture facilities that lead to stress, disease outbreak, poor water quality, impacting their overall welfare. Practices like selective breeding is pressuring them to grow very quickly, very fast, has led to genetic deformities and health problems in fish. I think people think when they eat fish, they're just eating one fish. You're not eating one fish. That one fish has been fed a lot of fish meal and fish oil derived from wild caught fish. It's very inefficient as a deliverable of protein to us. And that contributes to further overfishing and pressure on the marine ecosystem. Excess feed and waste accumulate on the floor, the sea floor where fish pens are, and that leads to oxygen depletion, release of pollutants, harming more local marine habitats. And one of the scariest things, I think, is the escape of farmed fish, which leads to the genetic kind of contamination of wild populations and competition for resources. There's also antibiotic use and chemicals in aquaculture that to try to control disease, which of course it's water, so it doesn't stay there. It goes into the surrounding aquatic ecosystems. It affects human health, the water we're swimming in, the water we might be drinking. And it's just generally unsustainable and very cruel for the fish.
I think it's critically important for us to understand the impact our way of producing food is having, both on our well-being and on the health of ecosystems. But the meat and dairy and egg and fish industries have fought aggressively to ensure that the products they sell retain their foothold in the modern diet. For example, they have successfully fought every effort to include the environmental impact of food production in the U.S. dietary guidelines.
One result is that the health researchers tasked with making recommendations for what to include in the... I don't know if we can go though. Hello everybody, I think we are on here, but I'm not completely sure. We have had a technical glitch come up, so I'm on live. I'm gonna wait for our team to confirm with me if I'm actually on live or if I'm just talking to myself here. But I'm hoping that we're gonna get our stream back here momentarily. So I'm just going to keep talking for a moment until I get a cue that we're actually on live. And we want to apologize. Something occurred with YouTube that we do not understand, and we are still figuring it out. But in any case, I'm on here, hoping that we'll be on live here for a period of time, and then we'll get this thing addressed as soon as possible, and that we'll be able to clean up the replay so that it's a clean message for all of you. I'm still on here just hoping that I'm on live and not really sure if I am, because we want to capture this later on. So I'm just here hoping that you're seeing me and not really knowing if you are, but we're going to be working on this as quickly as possible and hopefully have this back. I'm just checking actually to see. Yeah, I think you might be seeing me. I think I'm here. That's good. All right. So everybody, I just want to apologize. We had a glitch just now in our broadcast. We're working on it. Our team is working on it. But rather than giving you a blank screen, we wanted to be on with you right now with me so that I can at least be with you in this moment and let you know we're working on it. Please hang on with us. We've been receiving a lot of wonderful responses. I'm going to go ahead and respond to some of the comments that have been coming in today, and we'll come back to our broadcast of episode 8 as soon as possible, as soon as we get this issue sorted out. Susan said, "It saddens me to think about the world my grandchildren and all the younger generations will be facing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, John and Ocean, for doing this summit and bringing this information to light and caring for and loving people, animals, and the world." Susan, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, my apologies that we had to interrupt episode 8 in the middle here. We'll get it back up and running for you as soon as possible. We're so glad you're in this journey with us, and we thank you for your care. You know, I think all of us care. All of us care about our kids and our grandkids and the world that we love. All of us want to be a part of the solution. One of the tragedies, I think, of our times is how many people do deep down see humanity almost like a cancer on the earth, like we're destroying the world and consuming it voraciously and unsustainably. And we feel that and we know that, and we don't want to be a part of that, but we don't know a better way. What we're learning here in this summit is the powerful impact that our food choices can have on every dimension of our lives, from our bodies and our health to our entire planet. And we are seeing, as we're learning today in episode 8, how powerful food can be to shape the future of life on Earth. And that, I think, is the really big picture. And that, I think, is part of what is so powerful and so important. We'll get back to the rest of episode 8 as soon as we can, as soon as we have this glitch resolved. And in the meanwhile, you can think of this as a bit of an intermission. Unexpected and unplanned, but nevertheless an intermission. Margarita said, "Is it really possible to make a difference that the Earth will be protected? FAO is a very powerful organization, and many humans will not cut out or even cut down on eating meat. I don't know, it all seems so overwhelming to solve." Margarita, thank you for asking. I certainly stay up at night sometimes worrying and wondering about these exact same questions. But here's what I do know. Every single one of us has opportunities to do what we can. Helen Keller said something that has come back to me many times. She said, "I'm only one person, and I cannot do everything. But just because I cannot do everything does not mean I will refuse to do that which I can." So as for me, I don't know whether humanity will turn things around or not. I don't know whether big governmental organizations will become part of the solution or continue to perpetuate and subsidize and promote lifestyle choices and food systems that are destroying our planet and our health. But what I do know is that I get to choose what I eat and how I live, what I stand for and what I advocate. And as for me, I want to be a part of the solution. I want to do what I can. And we all get to do that. And here's something else I have noticed over the decades. The people who are not doing what they can with what they've got tend to feel pretty cynical. The people who are doing what they can with what they've got tend to feel a lot more hope. So when you put what we're learning into action in your life, you will feel that your vision for the world gets a bit brighter. Because when you know that you're on the right side of history, it can feel deeply empowering, deeply inspiring. In case you're wondering, folks, we are in a little intermission here in the midst of the broadcast of episode 8. I'm just waiting for the cue from our team to know if we've got things back so we can go up and running again with the rest of the episode. And in the meanwhile, we're having a little intermission here due to some technical glitches that have emerged. Wendy said, "I've been asked what would you do with the cattle if they stop eating them? If we do, they are taking down their fences and letting them roam like deer. We have hit both deer and a cow. Your vehicle does not survive hitting a cow. What are the plans for the cattle and deer populations if everyone stops eating them?" Well, Wendy, thanks for asking. Sorry you hit a cow with your car. That was probably terrible for the cow and the car. The reality is that cattle and deer are very different. Deer are wild creatures and they breed on their own, and they manage themselves within their own ecosystems, and sometimes they get out of balance, and that's its own whole world. But cattle are quite different because cattle are bred in very large quantities, largely through artificial insemination done by humans. And the only reason we have so much cattle in the world is because of that, because of human intervention. They are not native even to the Americas. Bison are. And so if we were to eat less meat, it wouldn't just be all at once overnight. It's a gradual process, and the industry would produce less, and the land could go back to wild things, wild ecosystems, nature, and regenerate in all kinds of ways. And we could use it in all kinds of ways because we'd free up so much land. I don't think anybody's advocating for cows just running wild everywhere in the streets. So if there are going to be cows, there probably should be contained in some way or the other. But there are lots of ways to manage that. Jessica said, "I live in poverty, but have a fierce passion about changing my life and others by teaching them nutrition by doing such simple things. You inspired me with this free docuseries to seek more free health classes. I've searched for 3 years in my area for broccoli sprouts. Have not found them yet, so I just found a free 5-day course during this docuseries that I finished today on sprouts. I made a vow to bring sprouts to this area. I want to offer free recipes and classes and sprouts to my local homeless shelter. You've stirred the fire inside me, and it's so high I'm in the clouds about this, and I have you to thank. So very much appreciated. On a PS, I'll definitely be saving for your nutrition course. I want nothing more than to learn. I crave it. Jessica, thank you so much for being here and being a part of this journey with us. I'm so glad that you are learning about sprouting. Sprouting is an incredibly powerful tool because we talk a lot about the power of growing food and growing vegetables. And sprouts are a food that's the easiest to grow. Anybody can do it, even if they have no yard space whatsoever. You just need a little bit of space by your sink to be able to have a jar and grow sprouts in there. And sprouts are amazing because you're taking seeds, which are super healthy, and you're making them many times more healthy. As the sprouts emerge, you actually get more vitamins, more nutrients, more bioavailability. Sprouts are just kind of awesome. So it's great that you're doing this, and broccoli sprouts could be the most super healthy of all. In case you're wondering why I'm on here talking and we're not watching episode 8, it's because we had a glitch in the broadcast of episode 8. Our team is currently working on it. Apologies for the disconnect, but this is kind of an intermission, if you will. We will be back on as soon as possible, and we so apologize for the impact of this. Episode 8 will continue, assuming we get that working soon with the second half of it. But we're having a little intermission here, and I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, sharing some words with you. And as we go through the day, of course, please continue to post and engage in the comment section on the broadcast page. You can share the comments about what you're learning and what it means to you and how it's impacting your life. You can respond to other people's comments. And let's just keep building this community and growing together in this food revolution movement. Thank you all for your patience and your persistence in being here with us. We'll be back online with episode 8 as soon as possible. Our team is working on it. And I'm just giving a glance over here, just making sure that John knows that I'll be ready. John Pitts, our broadcast technician, I'll be ready, and he'll let me know as soon as we're ready with episode 8. And he says, yes, we're still working on it. Not quite sure what happened. YouTube seems to have taken down the stream for that moment, so we are working on getting it back up. Do not know what may have caused that, but, we do recognize that sometimes some of these messages can be a little hard to get out. I'll just leave it at that. But it's important. It's so important. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're building a food revolution, because we need change. And the opportunity is here for all of us to be that change. And thank you, everyone who's watching and who's a part of this movement with us, for your partnership and your leadership in this revolution. Michelle said, my journey with food consciousness began in the early 1980s, for which I consider myself very lucky. Your work in this field has been invaluable to me. Since 2020, every year I buy the docuseries and the empowerment package. Independent science has finally opened up to this important area of study. You deliver the latest knowledge and all the nuances surrounding it. Because I trust the food revolution source, I have saved hours of research, and I'm able to determine if I need to tweak anything in my lifestyle. My family taught me that food is medicine. Today, my wife and I have been together for over 30 years. No pharmaceuticals, no illnesses. Although you may not have known it, you both, John and Ocean, as well as the people in your organization, have been right beside us for the last 12 years, guiding and helping us to decipher the propaganda from the true science. We are grateful on a daily basis. May all of you give to others be returned to you and all involved through health, love, peace, and joy. Michelle, thank you so much for those kind words and for implementing all that you can to create health in your body and life. And I'm so happy that you and your partner are doing well. And I'm so happy you've been with us for these last 12 years. And I'm so glad you're with us now. Blessings to you, and wishing you abundant health and love and peace and joy as well. Again, everybody, if you're surprised to see me on here, we're having a little intermission in the midst of the broadcast of episode 8. We had a glitch. YouTube shut down the stream for reasons we are still trying to figure out. We're working very hard to get it back up. As soon as we have the ability. Again, we will begin the second half of episode 8, so you can watch the rest of it. In the meanwhile, I'm on live with you, sharing responses to some of the incredibly moving comments that are being shared on our broadcast page. Lori said, Ocean and John, I'm 72 years young, a mom and a grandma who has discovered the magic of whole food plant-based eating. I'm completely blown away by the impact that this way of eating has had on my overall well-being and health. I have tried possibly every diet known to man to lose weight. Somewhere along these past 10 years, I somehow slowly lost confidence and faith in my ability to live my life the way I had envisioned it, healthy and active. I went cold turkey, quit drinking alcohol, and went completely whole food plant-based. In just 3 weeks, I have lost 12 pounds. But that isn't the most remarkable outcome. I just feel so alive. I sleep better. My moods and mental outlook are so much brighter and clearer. My sugar cravings are at an all-time low. I feel terrific. I even find that I have more patience, more tolerance, and I just view each and every day as such a gift and treasure. I told my daughter today that I wish everyone in my life who I love and care about would just try this for only 2 weeks. I am positive that if they truly did, they would never go back. Thank you so much for this wonderful series and the work that you bring to the world. I am taking as many notes as I can. Well, Lori, thank you so much for sharing that. I am so happy. And this is something that I really want to emphasize, folks. We have a lot of research showing that people who eat healthier live longer. And some people think, well, why would I want to prolong my suffering? And yet, the good news is that eating healthier doesn't just add years to life, it can add life to years. When you give your body the right fuel, you really can feel better, more energetic, better moods, more tolerant, more patient, better sleep. It can help us to be better people when we feel better, more whole, more alive, more resourceful in response to the inevitable challenges that come our way in life. So how wonderful that in just a couple of weeks you're experiencing such benefits, Lori, and we're wishing you continued success. We want to encourage you to stay with it, continue and carry on, because at the end of the day, think of your life like you're walking on a journey, and there's paths. And when you start on a new path, you're moving in a new direction. You see a new landscape. You have a new sense of hope and vision and possibility for where you might be going. The thing is that although you've started in a new direction, which is huge, it's the steps you take day in and day out that actually get you to a new place. And so it's the continuity that I really want to emphasize. For everybody who's feeling that kind of spark of hope, we want to support you to sustain it long term. This is why FRN has created Whole Life Club, which is our ongoing membership community, and a lot of other resources, including our email newsletter, just so that we can help you stay on track and continue on your path to optimal health. So thank you for being in the journey. Thank you for taking the notes. Thank you for being in this process, and blessings to you every step of the way. Vanessa said, so far I've made the asparagus soup, the cherry cobbler, and the arugula blackberry salad. So good. Major kudos to the recipe development team and Nicole for demonstrating the steps in that salad recipe. I have to say, while shifting from a heavily processed vegan diet to a whole food plant-based diet, it's been revolutionary in my health over the last 14 months. I have trouble eating bitter greens. Usually I get them by throwing them in a smoothie. But that salad was the first time I enjoyed eating arugula. Fun surprise. Thank you, Ocean and John, and everyone at FRN for caring about the planet and all the beings on it so much. Love and many thanks to you all. Well, how wonderful, Vanessa. I'm so glad that you've been enjoying the bitters. So glad that you are finding the difference between, oh, check the thread. I am being told to check the thread. There may be some new information. Swapping the video stream on the broadcast page. Okay, I have some new information. I'm going to interrupt right here because I know y'all want to get back to episode 8. So here we are. What I am being asked to tell you is that we are swapping the video stream on the broadcast page. So hang tight and refresh the page in about 5 minutes or so. Actually, it might only be about 1 minute. It will be pretty quick. So if you're on the broadcast page, hang in there. I'm going to cut out in a moment. I'm going to come back in a moment. Come on back, refresh the page in about a minute, and we should be back, and then we can continue with episode 8. Again, so sorry for these challenges, everybody, and we will have you back up and running with the rest of episode 8 as soon as possible. Refresh in a minute if I cut